Alex Marlow here, Editor-in-Chief of Breitbart News, host of the Breitbart News Daily podcast as well. Senator Ted Cruz is with me. Senator, it's great to speak with you at AmericaFest. A lot on the agenda. I know your time is limited. You're going to speak a little bit later. Why don't you tell us a preview of what you're going to tell the crowd of younger people, thousands of them?
It's an incredible crowd. I think there's a lot of energy here, a lot of enthusiasm. And really what I want to do is encourage them. The threats we're seeing to this country, they're unlike anything we've ever seen. That Washington is crazy, the left is, they have handed the agenda over to the radicals in their party, they've handed it over to the Bernie Sanders and the Elizabeth Warrens and the AOCs, and we're seeing trillions in spending, trillions in taxes, trillions in debt. We're seeing open borders and chaos. We're seeing an assault on our constitutional rights. We're seeing absolute chaos and devastation in foreign policy and national security. But all of that, what I want to do more than anything else is give people encouragement and good news, that I think it is so bad that people are waking up and people are seeing, people's eyes are opening up that this doesn't make any sense. And I think we are on the verge of and experiencing a revival of common sense conservative ideas, a revival of free enterprise and limited government, a revival of devotion to the Bill of Rights. And I think the young men and women here are a critical part of making that happen, that their energy and passion is literally saving this country.
One thing that's really fascinating right now is to watch certain states become almost trendy. Texas, of course, is in that group. People are flocking to Texas of all political stripes, which I'm nervous about. And it is, at the same time, seems like so many of our corporations and our bureaucratic establishment and, of course, the ruling class right now in Washington are trying to work against federalism. They really want to eliminate federalism, and they're chipping away at it. Could you opine on this?
Well, sure. Look, the left believes in power. And their ideas are unpopular. Their ideas don't work. If you look at across the country, big blue states, they're hemorrhaging population. You look at the 10 highest tax states, they're virtually all losing population. You look at the big red states, you look at low tax states, virtually all of them are having population streaming into them. And it's because their ideas don't work. You know, I was several months ago, I was talking to some graduate students at a big public university. And, you know, like most graduate students, they were lefties. And I pointed out, I said, look, I was pitching the virtue of federalism. I'm a big believer in federalism. We have 50 states, and the states are different. Nobody would expect California to adopt the same laws Texas does. No one would expect New York and Alabama to adopt the same laws. We have 50 states. And the laws of any given state should reflect the values, the mores of the citizens there. But the question I asked the graduate students is, I said, tell me something. Why is there not socialized medicine in this country? So leftists have been arguing for a long time. They want socialized medicine. There is no barrier whatsoever, zero, to establishing socialized medicine at the state level. California, you got a Democratic governor, you have a Democratic supermajority in the House, supermajority in the Senate. They can enact any damn thing they want. Why haven't they? Well, they looked at it, they tried, and they realized it would cost so much money it would bankrupt the state. Vermont, Bernie Sanders' home state. There is no prohibition on Vermont establishing socialized health care. Not a single state in the union, no matter how blue, has done it. Why? Because if you enact it, number one, you see quality drop, you see waiting periods, you see scarcity, and you see massive taxes, and so people would flee the state. So what do Democrats want to do? They know if they put socialized medicine in California and it didn't work, and it wouldn't work, that more people would flee the state. And so what do they want instead? They want it nationally on all 50 states, because they want to say, you can't flee. Our ideas are so bad, if you had a choice, you'd get the hell out. So we're going to put it everywhere. And look, I guess you could leave the country, but that's a pretty dramatic step to leave the country. And the fact that they are afraid to do it anywhere they have control, it really shows that their ideas are really bad.
Yeah, and they seem to be becoming less and less popular as time goes on, but that gets them, I think, more dug into their philosophy, which is compelling and also very scary. Let's turn to the work of the Senate. Right now, Build Back Better is dead, I guess, for now. We're always afraid of the zombie bills coming back. But it seems like the tactic of the left is just to scold Joe Manchin for this. I don't think that's going to work, so that encourages me that maybe it's dead. But what does this mean to you, that it's not happening?
Manchin put out a statement that he's going to oppose the bill. Build Back Broke is what I call it. Sure. The bill is Bernie Sanders' socialist budget. It is trillions in new spending, trillions in new debt, trillions in new taxes. It would be devastating to jobs in this country. It would dramatically exacerbate the inflation bomb that we're seeing going off already. And Manchin, I think, showed a lot of courage where he came and said he's not going to oppose it, he's done. Now, in doing that, he's reflecting the views of the people of West Virginia. West Virginia is a bright red state, and the people of West Virginia don't want to see trillions of new taxes and spending and debt, and they don't want to see inflation. And so Manchin is doing his job. Does it come back sometimes next year? Maybe. That's always possible. And you know, a lot of folks ask me, okay, so is Manchin going to become a Republican? Look, I hope so. I've tried to convince him. I think every Republican senator has tried to convince Joe multiple times to come over. I'm not going to hold my breath on it. Yeah. And the reason is really cultural. I mean, he's grown up as a Democrat his whole life. He's the godfather of Democrats in West Virginia. And I get that's hard when you've spent 60 plus years as Mr. Democrat to suddenly flip over to the other side. You know, you've got generations of staffers, of supporters who've been with you for the whole time. To flip is hard. The one thing that might make it happen is the left is so mean and nasty. I mean, they are hateful. You look at the scorn Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, just piled on Manchin. You look at the nastiness and hatred coming from Bernie Sanders towards Manchin. You look at these left-wing activists who chase him down the street, scaring at him, yelling at him. You look at, when Joe's in D.C., he lives on a houseboat. Yes. The left-wing activists who got in kayaks and went to harass him at his home. It's, Kyrsten Sinema here in Arizona, where left-wing activists chased her into the ladies' room. It is possible, if they are so nasty and vicious, maybe they chase him out of the party. But regardless, I'm glad that at least right now it looks like Build Back Broke is not going to happen. That's a big victory for the American people.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to ask you a little bit about the work that the Senate could be doing, assuming you guys get control again, the Republican side. I think Mitch McConnell, at least for the Breitbart audience, I think he might have skated a little bit because he was pretty solid on the judges. Yeah. A lot more would be expected of him if the Republicans get the Senate again. I don't think that people are going to be quite as satisfied just with that, holding the line on judges. So do you have a message for the leader right now, or any thoughts coming for the next year, anything you want to convey?
Look, I've served 9 years with Mitch. He and I at times have had a famously antagonistic relationship. We battled during the Obama administration, and what we disagreed with was how much could Republicans stand up and fight against the Obama administration. And I believe we could do so quite a bit, and he didn't. And we had really vigorous disagreements. I will say when Donald Trump was president, Mitch and I worked together pretty well. We both wanted to win some big victories for the country. You look at something like the tax cut. Yeah. I worked hand in hand with the White House and hand in hand with Mitch in passing the biggest tax cut of a generation. And it produced enormous results for the country. I agree with you on judges. That is by far Mitch's best issue, and he's been really strong on judges, and he has helped. I care deeply about judges. Last year I wrote a book called One Vote Away: How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. It's the #1 bestseller in the country on Amazon. I tell a story in the book One Vote Away about judges, and it's when Scalia died. And it was the middle of the presidential campaign, and in fact, he died in the morning, and that night was the South Carolina presidential debate. And I got an early heads up that it had happened because he died in Texas. He was at a hunting camp out in West Texas. And so the sheriff called John Cornyn and me to say, hey, we just found Justice Scalia dead here. And so I was doing debate prep. I was sitting there with our team. And so we immediately canceled everything else and said, all right, let's focus on what to say. And the instant the news broke, I publicly called for, let's keep this seat vacant. Let's not fill it. And what's interesting, and I talk about this in the book One Vote Away, is Mitch, shortly thereafter, put out a statement calling to keep the seat vacant, not to fill it. And what Mitch's former chief of staff told the New York Times is the reason he did that is he knew that night at the debate that I was going to stand up and say, keep the seat vacant. And he didn't want to be seen to be following my lead, so he went out and did it anyway on his own. And my view is great, fantastic.
Yes.
If you're doing good things, I don't care who gets the credit. Like, let's actually stand and deliver. And the fact that we kept that seat vacant and let the American people decide, it is one of the greatest victories for liberty, for the Constitution we have seen in the country. And so my hope is, I think 2022 is going to be a really good election.
Yes.
I think Republicans are going to retake the House, and I think we've got a really good shot at retaking the Senate. And if that happens, what I hope we see is Republicans standing up and leading against the disastrous policies of this administration. I view my job right now as leading the fight against every dumbass idea from Biden and Harris and Schumer and Pelosi. That's what I'm going to keep doing.
Yeah.
And I hope we see Senate Republicans standing as one doing that in a year when we've retaken both houses.
So we all want to see the McConnell that held that seat open, but instead sometimes we see the McConnell changes the filibuster rules to pass the debt ceiling increase without having to have any Republicans vote for it. Like, what was your reaction to that move that happened?
I think it was a serious mistake, and I urged Mitch not to do that. I urged the conference not to do that. We had a disagreement on the right tactic.
Yeah.
I am hopeful that if we have a majority that we won't waste it.
Yes.
And that in particular, we'll use it to hold this administration accountable. Because look, if we win a majority in Congress, that means bad legislation is mostly dead. It means
yes.
a multi-trillion-dollar tax increase is off the table. It means making D.C. A state is off the table. It means packing the U.S. Supreme Court is off the table. None of the really horrifically damaging stuff the Democrats want to do will pass. But it is unlikely we're going to be able to actually enact into law really good, meaningful policies because Biden will veto it.
Right.
Which means in 2023, if we've retaken Congress, they will shift their strategy to regulations and executive order. Remember, Obama famously said he had a phone and a pen.
Right.
Well, Biden's going to discover a phone and a pen and I think be really abusive on the executive order and regulatory side in 2023 and 2024. I think Republicans with control of Congress, we've got to have hearings, we've got to have oversight, we've got to hold them to account and fight and use the leverage of Congress to resist the abuse of power by this administration.
You also have a great podcast called Verdict, and
Yeah.
you cover a lot of these types of issues if people want more on the subject. I was curious about the court packing conversation, which
Yeah.
seems to have gone away. If there are any major threats to Roe v. Wade coming up in the next year, which there could be, it might come back. But have you noticed this too, that we were talking about nonstop, then all of a sudden it's gone? Why?
Well, in terms of the left, they'd love to pack the court. That remains a real priority. The reason you don't hear it as much as we did before is, at least right now, Manchin and Sinema have said they won't end the filibuster. And the only way the Democrats can pack the court is if they end the filibuster. On Roe versus Wade, you mentioned my podcast, Verdict.
Yeah.
We launched Verdict January of last year. And within a couple of weeks, it was the #1 ranked podcast in the world.
Wow.
We've had over 40 million downloads. We just recorded our 100th episode. We actually did an entire pod on Roe versus Wade and the oral arguments in the Mississippi case. And so, I co-host it with Michael Knowles, and we spend 30 to 45 minutes trying to bring people behind the scenes to really what's going on in the Senate, what's going on in the White House, what's going on in the Supreme Court, and cutting through the spin and the nonsense that a lot of the corporate media provides. And when it comes to the Supreme Court argument in the Mississippi case, I'm actually quite optimistic. I think the votes are clearly there to uphold the Mississippi law, which bans abortion after 15 weeks, and I think the odds are significant that we will see the Supreme Court overrule Roe versus Wade, which is what they should do. Now, it's worth noting that if Roe versus Wade is overturned, that doesn't mean suddenly abortion is illegal across the country. What it means is it goes back to the states. You know, you and I started this conversation talking about federalism. Right. Listen, in bright blue states, in California and New York, everybody knows that the liberal politicians there will maintain essentially unlimited access to abortion because that's what they support. In more purple states, you'll see some restrictions, but somewhere in the middle, and in redder states, you'll see more significant protections of life. I think the left right now has convinced itself in the media that that's going to be some apocalyptic moment in this country. I actually think it reflects where the country is, and there's some diversity of opinion. I'd like to see every life protected, but to do that, you got to convince your fellow citizens. You got to make the case. You got to make the case through the democratic process, and I think if the court does the right thing and says, we're no longer going to throw out the decisions of 330 million Americans through the democratic process and strike them down in favor of 9 unelected judges, that's much more consistent with the Constitution. It's what I hope to do.
I got 2 more questions, one tough one, one fun one.
All right.
And the tougher one is a week or so ago, you said that we should not boycott the Beijing Olympics. The athletes shouldn't. You took a little heat for that. Did you rethink that at all, or are you still there? You still think that we should be in there in China?
So look, I think we've tried this before. Jimmy Carter boycotted the Olympics in 1980, and it was a dismal failure. It didn't work. It was a step of weakness, and I don't think it's fair to punish a bunch of young athletes, young men and women who have spent their entire lives training for just this brief moment to compete on the international stage. I'm not willing to destroy their dreams. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be unwilling to confront China. I think we should call out China. The Chinese Communist government, they are murderers, they are torturers, they have concentration camps with over 1 million Uyghurs. They engage in espionage, they engage in fraud. They covered up COVID and have direct responsibility for the hundreds of thousands of lives lost, the trillions of dollars destroyed. I think what we ought to do is condemn China's abuses, speak clearly, use the Olympics to shine a light on China's abuses, but also let our athletes go there and kick their commie asses, and that's the right answer.
Sure, but if NBC is making money off of a giant, TV play, and it's going to be a big PR win for China, I think, in all likelihood.
Not if the coverage is all about how they're murderers and torturers.
Well, that would be our coverage at Breitbart, but a lot of these corporations that control our media, they love working with China.
Well, you're right, and we need to call on, listen, I think the corporate sponsors ought to cut their money.
I agree with that.
When I'm saying that we should allow our athletes to go, that doesn't mean we should spend money. And we've seen in the past that you're right, the corporate media, they are corrupt. They are China shills. They're in bed with China. We need to call them out. And by the way, we saw a really good example of that with the Women's Tennis Association. So Peng Shuai, the only Chinese athlete ever to be ranked #1 in the world in doubles tennis, women's tennis, she posted an allegation that a senior official in the Chinese Communist government sexually assaulted her, the former vice premier of China. Within 30 minutes, that allegation was taken down, and she's been disappeared.
Right.
And it is horrific, but the Women's Tennis Association has shown remarkable courage because they've called for her to be released, for there to be a full investigation, for China to come clean, for them to have transparency. And they went so far as they canceled their events in China. They gave up millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars standing and defending their athlete. I think it is a massive contrast between the courage of the Women's Tennis Association to the cravenness of leagues like the NBA that just grovel before China.
Senator Ted Cruz, the podcast is Verdict, the book One Vote Away. I promise one fun one. What is Jimmy Kimmel's problem with you? I thought you played hoops, you beat him. I thought that was the truce. I mean, he is one of everyone's favorite characters of Breitbart. He is one of our favorite guys to hate. What's his deal?
He's just a little bit obsessed.
He really is.
So he regularly, sometimes there are weeks where it seems like every night he goes on and his monologue is coming after me. Most recently, he posted this really horrific photoshopped video of my head on a naked body of some other dude riding an enormous hot dog, which is like I don't even want to know where his mind is taking him. It's a frightening image. But you know, I have a simple response whenever he takes a shot at me. I just send out again video of when he and I played basketball one-on-one. In particular, there's a video we did called Buckets and Blocks, where we had 6,000 people came out and watched us play. We did it for charity, raised $80,000 for charity, but at the end of the day, I kicked his ass. Yeah. And every time he takes a shot, I'm just going to laugh and remind him of that.
Yeah, I think it's working on your behalf. I think he looks totally ridiculous, but we're enjoying watching it from afar. So
good.
Congrats on that. Some good earned media. Senator Cruz, appreciate the time.
Take care.